So today, we're going to jump into this absolutely brilliant passage from the Talmud that honestly plays out like a great detective story. We're going to see how these ancient sages looked at a bunch of what seemed like totally separate laws, and with just one single key, they unlocked how it was all one perfectly interconnected system, a truly beautiful, unified whole.
You know, when you look at any really complex ancient legal system, like, say, the biblical laws about sacrifices, you find all these super specific rules for specific situations. But you also start to see these holes, right? Apparent gaps. And our story today kicks off with one of these exact kinds of puzzles.
Okay, so here's the puzzle. The book of Leviticus is crystal clear about the sin offering. If something touches its flesh, that object soaks up some of its holiness, it becomes sanctified. Simple enough. But what about all the other sacrifices? The burnt offering? The peace offering? The text just goes silent. So, does the same rule apply or not? How are you supposed to know for sure if there isn't a specific verse for each one? This is the mystery that had to be solved.
Now, you'd think the sages would have to go on this huge textual scavenger hunt, looking for a dozen different verses to plug a dozen different holes, but nope. What they found was so much more elegant. They found one single verse that acted like a master key, a verse that could unlock the connections between all the major offerings at once.
And this is it. Leviticus 7:37. I mean, at first glance, it just looks like a list, doesn't it? Kind of like a table of contents. But the sages saw something way more profound going on here. They realized that by putting all of these different offerings together under the roof of a single sentence, the text was forging this incredibly powerful legal connection between them.
So here's the big idea, the crucial principle they pulled from this. It's a principle of analogy. If you can prove a specific law is true for just one of the offerings in this list, then, bam, you can logically extend that exact same law to every other offering in the list. This one verse suddenly becomes this amazing tool, not just for patching up gaps, but for proving that the whole system has this beautiful internal logic.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this master key actually work in practice? Well, the Talmudic discussion literally walks us through the list, and it uses a unique feature of each offering to teach a universal rule for all of them. So let's see them put this key to use, starting with the first one.
So first up is the burnt offering, the olah. And from this one offering, they pull a rule for every animal sacrifice mentioned in that master verse. They all have to be slaughtered with a specific kind of utensil. You can't just grab a sharp rock or a piece of reed. It has to be a proper tool.
But hold on a second. This raises a couple of pretty big questions, right? First, what kind of utensil are we talking about? And maybe even more important, how do we even know this rule applies to the burnt offering to begin with? I mean, you can't build your logic on something that isn't itself proven. The whole thing has to be airtight.
Well, the Talmud gives a super specific answer. The utensil has to be a knife, a machalet in Hebrew. And the proof for this, well, this is the cool part. It doesn't come from the law books in Leviticus. It comes from a much, much older story.
And this is just a brilliant move. The proof is from the story of the binding of Isaac. Abraham takes a knife for the sacrifice, which ends with him offering a ram as a burnt offering. You see, the text itself makes the connection. The tool, the knife, is explicitly linked to the type of offering, the burnt offering. Once that's locked in, our master key verse kicks in, and that knife rule now applies to all the other sacrifices too.
All right, next up, the sin offering, the chatat. And with this one, we get to circle right back and solve our original mystery. Just as we know the sin offering makes things holy by touch, well, now that master key verse lets us extend that rule to every single other offering in the list. The initial puzzle is solved. It's that simple.
Now this next one is where the logic gets really wild, really abstract. It's about the guilt offering, the asham. Here's the thing. This offering is always a male animal. So obviously it could never have a fetal sac or a placenta. It's a physical impossibility. And yet, the sages use this completely theoretical, impossible case to derive a universal rule. For any offering, including the female ones, the fetal sac and placenta are not considered sacred. It's just an amazing example focusing on pure abstract logic.
Okay, so now you're probably thinking, got it. It's a formula. You plug in an offering, you get out a rule. But it's not quite that simple, because the discussion now takes this fascinating pivot. What happens when another brilliant mind picks up the same master key, but uses it to unlock a completely different set of doors?
This is where the legendary Rabbi Akiva steps into the picture. And he basically says, yep, you're absolutely right. Leviticus 7:37 is the master key. But I think you're using it to derive the wrong set of laws. He shows there's more than just one valid way to connect the dots.
Just look at how he completely remixes the whole thing. The first opinion got that sanctity by touch rule from the sin offering. Rabbi Akiva? No, he gets it from the meal offering. He then uses the sin offering to teach a totally different rule, that services have to be done with the priest's right hand. And he uses the guilt offering to prove that an animal's bones aren't sacred. It's the same key, but it leads to a different yet equally logical set of conclusions.
So you gotta ask, why do this? Why have multiple ways of proving the same laws? Because finding the answer is only half the battle. The real intellectual project here is to show just how deeply coherent this system is. It's about proving that the whole structure is so tightly woven and harmonious that you can take different logical paths and still arrive at the same established truths.
Let's make this concrete with that right-hand rule. So Rabbi Akiva gets there using the sin offering and our master key verse. But then the Talmud brings up another sage, Rabbi Bar Barhana, who proves the exact same rule from a totally different verse, something about any ritual that mentions a finger. Two different proofs, one single conclusion. See, that's not a contradiction. For them, it's a profound confirmation of the system's integrity.
Okay, let's step back from all this incredible, intricate detail for a second. Let's zoom out. What's the big picture? What is this all really about?
I mean, think about it. If all they wanted to do was answer a few practical questions, they could have just issued a decree. Here's the new rule. Everybody follow it. Easy. But clearly, that's not what's going on here. Something much, much deeper is happening.
The real project was philosophical. It was to prove that these laws that seem so separate for burnt offerings, sin offerings, peace offerings, they aren't just a random grab bag of rules. They're all different expressions of one single, unified, divine logic.
And you know, the clue was there right from the very beginning, in the first few words of that master key verse. It doesn't say, these are the laws, plural. It says, this is the law, singular. One single, overarching law that shows up in all these different forms. And this whole incredible intellectual exercise we just walked through, that was the proof.
And what's so amazing is that this ancient way of thinking, it's everywhere, even today. Think about a physicist searching for a grand unified theory to explain the entire universe, or a computer programmer trying to find that one elegant algorithm that solves a dozen problems at once. This deep, human quest to find the simple, unifying principle hiding inside all the complexity, it's a fundamental drive, and it's exactly what these Talmudic sages were masterfully practicing 2,000 years ago.